Okay, thanks for joining me in this class. So we're going to start with our seat on the bolster. So you have your bolster spine-wise. That's what we'll start calling this zone, is that our bolster is spine-wise. And when you're going to lean your weight back onto it, I want you to have enough of a support for your base of your bones, all the way to your tail on the bolster. Let's say you're longer than this, then you can add a block under your seat. So please use that if you feel like when you lie back, it's not sufficient support, okay? So when we apply the sand or any weight you have across the ribs, we lower the head back. I've got my belt nearby, but the adjustments to begin are to have the circulation in your chest and also your neck so that this can actually soften and relax the neck. So if there's a possibility your head is on a block, the block height could be low or at the second setting. So if you're not so convinced that the low height is sufficient, you could turn it. And this feels better for me right now. Just my heart rate feels a little bit more comfortable. Immediately it seems calmer. So deciding on the sensation in your body, your nervous system is your decision. And then we'll take the knees to touch together so they drop in, the toes turn in, the heels draw outwards in teepee pose. And you feel the direct relationship with the hips centered. Finding your belt, reach it back overhead and manage the hold of your belt, whether it's in a connected loop or not. You want to gather the belt in your hands wider than shoulder width apart above your chest. And then begin that process of reaching through the rib cage. So slow down and let the arms be the last director in the motion. So you want to allow your rib cage and your chest muscles to gradually open. There may be an end point with the range of your arms pulling on the belt, but feel the elbows widen, like there's a bit of a smile reaching from the lower front of the rib cage out to the armpit chest. And then the legs can stay the same if this is comforting for your back, or you can lengthen them both down. So feel they're sliding through the feet. Feel the pressure down into your feet as you release the legs. And you could release the belt if that seems like the most supportive experience in the moment. As the hands maybe relax the grip, you open out the chest and feel that range of reaction with your breathing tone. So one difference from this practice to a sitting practice in its mental, vibration is the difference in the tone of the breath and the lungs. And so considering each shape, changing your circulation efforts in your lungs, opening, expanding. So inhaling for a count of 4 through the nostrils and empty the lungs out for a count of 5 to 6. Relax the feet, whether the feet are still stepped in. See if you can let the knees rest together or come down to the legs elongating. Good, and let the few moments ahead here be ones of certainly letting go of your belt and surrendering so that the upper bones, especially the shoulders, the neck, the face, can soften. Feel the breath moving through the body, through the bones, and centering through the spine. Now motion the legs so there is a pressure in the back of your hips to encourage a knee to bend. So feel how you might press the tailbone down or the back of the pelvi, and then you can slide one foot at a time back in towards the center of your body. And as we move into this cycle of core balance, we'll take the sand off, and the one thing you will be needing is your belt. So if it's somewhere behind you, grab a hold and then take that belt off to the side so it's easy to get when you get to sitting. But for the time being, I'm still interested in my block under my head, and the reason being so that I can interlace my fingers at the roots, turn the palms up, and then as you reach the arms back overhead, fully extend the side ribs, and noticing that it's from the pelvis and then it lifts up into the rib cage, the arch of the spine, and the arch of the heart. You know, if the neck is pretty calm right here, we want to keep that in its core support. So now as you let go of the clasp of the hands, reach the arms out wide. Watch out for your environment. It might be affecting your arm movement. And then as you slide your hands to the legs, you're going to actually start to slide down. Take your block that's behind you off to the side. And this is a position where you have to slide down from the bolster. If you had a block under your seat, you need to move that too. And then take your belt, roll a little to one side, and then grasp your blanket. And we're going to put that blanket so it's all the way up the top of the bolster. And your bolster ideally is still set up on your blanket, the roll on underneath. If it kind of slid off, this would be a time to adjust that. And we'll bring our belt to a loop. This is a little bit of a big loop. So I'm going to slide it so I have a adjustable loop that I bring overhead and around to my legs first, and sit in front of your bolster. Still it's behind you spine wise, and we get our blocks and we put them in close by. So I want you to have those as a focus. But here in the moment of cobbler's pose, can you feel the knees motioning out? See if you can center your spine with the knees pushing their way away from the adductors are stretching open. Now we'll take our belt, and you want to have enough of a loop, right? So it can hold you. So you might start a little bit small, but go for the width, scoop them up. And then we kind of know some of these patterns that we do, but as you pull your belt to tighten it down, I want you to slide that belt all the way up near a hip. And ideally the buckle and the loop are something you can tighten in time. So the belt is facing, the tail is facing towards you to tighten it down. But as the blocks are fairly supportive, maybe you have them at this low height, maybe they're at the second setting. And we're going to guide our feet so that they are pushed together. There's no way that they're going to spill open. Don't have spilling feet, anything spilling out of your feet. So as you push down to that bolster, you're going to lower down and recline, and then encourage the thigh direction to motion open, especially if you like to wad up your blanket under your neck. Sometimes this can be relatively good to start with, making that curl under the neck so that cervical spine is not loaded with any arching. It's just extending out of the upper back, right? So that motion is lifted. And then the shoulders, right? And the back of the shoulders into the upper back can soften a bit, the trapezius. So we take the blocks. I'm going to put mine pretty comfortably adjusted under my legs. If my spine has a nice arch and my blanket is like this, I notice I tend to keep my blocks better. You know, seem to slip away. So however it works for you, have your belt on, be supported, and then as you move your arms to extend open, reach your hands around to your elbows. Feel that frame of your head with the arms. And then take the other crossing of the arms, the uncomfortable direction generally. Just let the abdomen gently move with the breath. Now let go, and as you take any weight that you might have in addition, this time that weight might go a little bit lower in your core beam. So it's down to, you could say the core bean, B-E-A-N, right? So the belly. And as that motion is with the abdomen to expand, everything flows down to the adductors, right? So the inner thigh has a circulation that's starting to get a little more steeped. And if it's too easy for you and you feel no volume of stretch, then you might take the blocks a little bit farther out, just under the knees, and get a feel. If your sand falls, then you got to bring it back up. But you want to feel that the movement of the belly is actually challenging to keep the sand on. You can also go sand from heart to down to the belly, and you probably won't lose it quite so easily. But we'll take it back with the arms open and the elbows heavy. So with an immediate ease for the nervous system. Center the next few moments on the breath. We compile these poses with a specific relationship, one to the next, expansive to begin, and then centering for the heart and the chest open. And ensure that your neck is comfortable. So if it's getting really easy for you to lie back in this shape, you might decide to move your blanket a little bit lower under your head. Just keep in mind that that curl under the neck might let your jaw gently lift and soften the neck. So going to what works best for you. Give a few moments here. How can this pose be a lung supportive position? See if you can branch through the breathing structure with the inhale, feeling that wave maybe in the same place as always. But taking the breath for 1 or 2 counts further with timing. So inhaling slowly, deeply, and exhaling fully and complete. When I have a complete exhalation all the way to its end. Very good. Now we're going to maintain, so this front channel from the side strands of the ribs in the front, right? When they are in this elongated and expansive state, I want you to feel if you can keep those long for a few more moments, specifically through this shape, with the sand if possible. It will compile on in time the memory in the rib cage, this shaping of the core. Okay, now when we take away the sand and we unbuckle, then we're going to slide the belt aside. I want you to keep it kind of down by the hips, so it'll be easy to reset this. But when you bring that left knee to point up, the left foot down, noticing this right inner thigh, how maybe it's casually kind of set open. It doesn't need a great deal of impulse to be in that direction. But now when you lift it and put that foot to the left knee, maybe it's different on how it turns out. So just kind of notice the challenges, or maybe you don't have any with this one. But if you have a block, you can set that up to the outer left leg. If you have a ball, you'll place that to the outer left leg, outer, right to the hip. And you don't have to use a prop, right? You could lean over with your legs to the left. It just would be a little bit intense, right? To balance that in the stomach muscles. So I would use something to wad up there. And it's likely going to be a block or a ball, unless you have an extra towel. So when you lean that leg over to that point, instead of grabbing the knee, which is okay, you might like to get a hold of that right knee with the left hand, just kind of feel the connection into your hip. But you could also work with simply motioning the knee away from you right here on its own without pressure and pulling. Just feel where its range is through the leg. Less hip intense likely, but a little more anatomically connected in what you can actually do. You're not using this, not that it's artificial, but an unnatural pulse. Now, when you switch the sides, right, you'll bring that right foot down, you'll move the left knee open. If you've got some props around under the leg, that's just fine. No big deal. It might be nice to have a block under the left knee. And then switch it, bring the left foot up, and then take that motion, the knee over towards the right, and get a feel for that left knee open. Now you can come back to the foot on the floor next to the right foot and just kind of see what is different when you hook the ankle to the right knee directionally for your hip. So you can hold the left knee with your right hand, right? And I don't have anything right now under my hip, like the ball, it's gone over there. So kind of playing with the differences, right? I have right now a block that's just over there under my right knee, so it works out just fine. So having some variety and just staying with your skeletal, I was going to say skeletal remains. That sounds terrible, huh? But the skeletal remaining motion, right? Without necessarily, I've got to have my ball. I've done this for a year right now, like this with the ball. So let it be, right, wherever it lands, and you'll feel the muscles respond. Right? Past the skeletal experience, it will be muscles. That means you're occurring in a life process. Huh? Now, feel how this waist can start to stretch through. And as you bring that left leg back up, well, actually everything comes up center. We're going to put a block or ball between the knees, and then let your arms move back so they're both reaching. You're sand free, right? You got a belt behind you somewhere, I'm sure, underneath your hips. So push into the ball or block. And as your arms are behind, you're going to work on lifting up your head from the blanket and squeeze the ball. Okay, now come back onto your blanket, bolster set, right? Squeeze the ball, keeping your head back, and then relax the grip on the ball or block. Breathe in, fill the belly, Think about every time you breathe in, it's like a tube down to the tummy and it expands, so the diaphragm moves down comfortably. And as you exhale, the belly and the diaphragm draws back and up. Now that's the direction I want you to focus on when you come up to sitting with this ball or block between the knees. So I just let the arms stay back. I try to do what's the most anatomically simplified here. So inhale, belly full. And then exhale, bring your arms with you because they have to come forward, right? If you're going forward, and move up, and maybe you're squeezing the ball, maybe not. So when you slide your feet forward, you'll bring your arms to the front besides your legs and lean back, not coming all the way onto your brain on the blanket, but lean back, find where the intensity is for you. Maybe you roll a little bit back on the bolster, but squeeze the ball and come up. Okay, lean back, squeeze the ball, and move back up to sitting. Lean back, squeeze, and back to your upright position. Move the ball or block, and take the belt. Connect the belt now again. Make that buckle happen to create your loop. This loop will stay. Okay, I've got my belt. I'm going to place it from my upper back forward to my feet. Okay, now as you kick them up, feel if you can move into this with that type of just lift them up and see what happens. See if you can collect balance, or if it's a little bit of a challenge, use your hands on the floor or holding the legs. And rather than how should the belt exactly be, the emphasis is on the inner direction, right? With the motions in the body. So I want you to kind of get a feel where the inner direction of the back line now is moving. So I mentioned we're doing legs today too. So when we move from our front opening, now we work through the back chamber into the back of the knees. So feel the legs straight. That's important here, straightening out the legs. Work with that tone around the thighs. If you're a little bit shaky, right, not happening for you right now, I would encourage you to hold the belt and maybe not even have it around your back. That's okay. You don't have to follow the same idea. With the props, you can have the idea of how do I get my legs up? Okay, take a few more moments, work on the straightness of the legs. There we go, good. I know it's nice to take a break out of this one for a couple weeks and then check it out again and see how it goes. Looks like it's going okay. Kitty with lungs. Okay, before we shift. Now, push the legs down. Feel that ultimate reaction right in your back. There's only so far you'll go before you have to get out of your belt. Can't get any farther down. So your knees can bend. So see if you can come out of this with your knees bending and then your feet landing, and that vigorous tone around the very sides of the hips here. So I want you to try to kind of feel that tone in the side of the hip right here and now. And then lean your chest forward, come out of the belt, slide it out of your feet. And then we're going to shift into side sage. So what I want you to do is bend your left knee between bending and blending. You're going to move into your side sage with the left hip as the down hip. Okay, so let's set this up. We got a couple blankets. They don't have to be essentially perfect in their fold, but they need to be kind of a hunk of cloth behind your bolster. Could be anything, hunks of cloth. Now, when you lean on that left hip, use a ball or block on the inner right leg, and then reach your ribs, tuck them so that your arm is actually the one that's tucked between the two layers of cloth, and then add some weight to your side. Essentially, you want to have that weight on your side to be either through the ribs or down to the hip. Both are good. So when you feel that side range extend, from one cat to the next. Okay, here we go. Yoga is happening. They want to join or they want to leave. Okay. So when I have the side on that range, feel if you need a block overhead to add that extra support, essential support. And with the sand option, can you continue that awareness that we were working in combination? Now we're going to the side. So we had the front body, then we looped into the back, and now we're searching in our side space, okay? So encourage where the length of the right arm is in reach. Also that left undercarriage of the arm into the back can relax. So that's relaxing for your neck. Now, if your head is turned to the back, right? Some people like to do this pose on the back of their head. Some like to have the side of the head on the blanket and kind of slightly rotate it in. So find where you're adapting your props to feel successfully in a side stretch. Now you can kind of visualize this one if you let your eyes soften, that any side reach has these elements in it, whether you're standing and trying to get a hold of something and reach through your side. So we're trying to sculpt out these muscles, these muscular paths in our side body. So breathe through the ribs. Yeah, see if you can experiment with that pull of breath and the motion of the rib cage and the centering down into the base hip. Let it be a little weight bearing. Give a few more moments. Good. Now, if that upper arm is a little bit pulled in this pose, you might work with the approach of shifting as we come out of it to open out the arm. And that arm selection on the right arm could be quite bent, and it could also be extending. So we all have awareness of our shoulders, some more than others, some days in the group in the front of the shoulder, and some we feel kind of mystery layers in there. So feel where you can explore as much expansiveness from the pec muscle, the chest, sliding into the connection of the arm, which you might call a shoulder. But wherever it is, it's a connector. Okay, now feel this difference. We're going to have a in-between cycle of motion. So I want you to shift your sand away if it hasn't already departed you. You're going to feel that rotation in as if you're going to roll into the bolster, but I want you to work your way to actually roll back for a moment. So let that right arm open. We're not completely getting out of the side layer. And then so it's movement. Now, I'm going to be adding cat-cow in a moment, but I want to give this opportunity for those that are maybe going to pass on as much cat-cow, maybe less, and you're going to do a little bit more of this expansive motion, turning and rotating. And those that are ready to come around to cat-cow, you're going to move your ball or block and then turn so that it's brief on the knees. So if you must have a blanket or towel under them, just put it there. You could slide and add your blanket under your knees. So hands are on the space between the props. Be sure that your position in your back is as open as possible. Kind of visualize like a mountain gorilla, right? You want to get some broadness in your back and not skimp on that. So you've got a really wide upper back scape. Okay, so much for cat pose. So we'll go gorilla. Okay, so hands are open, fingers spreading out. And then with the knees separating, I let the spine kind of coop itself into this rounded path, and the chin gradually moves to my chest. Good. Now, everyone good. So let the arch of the spine motion with your capacity to move your tail back and forth. So connect to the tail space, rounding and arching your back. Breathe on the inhale when you arch, along the exhale when you round. Okay, now last time, we're going to flow the ribs down. So we're going to lean into our bolster with our hips. So you have some space with your hands, right? There's still a little bit back to work on the arch of the spine. Now, if this is too much with the wrists, you can bring your elbows on the blankets. This is kind of nice to do too, with the palms facing in. Shrug my shoulders back and feel the simple awareness of the front space of the hip flexors, just lengthening, right? That doesn't take more than this kind of position. Either hands are down or elbows are down, and give it a few more moments so we get a full minute with that position. Yeah, and feel where there could be some potential for movement of the heart lifting, even if you're on your elbows. So connect to that wave of the spine. And as you start to move out of the shape, if you feel okay to come back to a dog pose, do so. And if not, you're going to go to side sage now. So those that want to take a dog pose for a few moments, reach your knees up, stretch your heels down, step your feet hips distance, and keep on the alert of the heels reaching to the floor. Continue with that for about another 10 seconds. And those that are wanting to go right to side sage, you'll be already moving over to your right hip. And then coming into that bolster lift and over. So get a feel if you need a ball. For all of us, let's come into side sage on the right hip. And keep connecting to these inner layers and trying to let the beam of the side really range and lengthen without the sandbag necessary every time. I mean, the second side, you're likely to similar to the first with your weight. But you could just feel where your awareness is challenged in your side. And that could be where you put the sand. So if you lengthen and you go, okay, the area that feels a little bit kind of short, stagnant, not very vibrant right now, that would be where you want your sand. So it might not be your ribs, it might be your hip. So keep in mind the sand is weight bearing, right? So for most of us, it's sometimes nice to just put some sand on and go with that. Okay, for the moment. Not every moment will you be sanded. And feel if that is plenty of circulation momentum with your sandbag where you put it. Okay, left arm is over. If it's really uncomfortable for your arm, don't do it. If it hurts, you can let your arm open. You could bring the left hand down to your right arm. And you could certainly put it on your side too. Okay, so you want to turn so that you're on your side and the waist is able to continue the momentum of lengthening and expanding in the costals, the intercostals. So if you're starting to fill out in the rib cage, good news. Okay, right? We want that to be vibrant in our bodies, to have this kind of robust rib dynamic with our breathing, and those muscles to get stronger. Defining your breath, exhaling, lengthening, and letting go. And you might stay right here for the next few moments. You might start to move your upper arm open, but it will be an expansive reach for your waistband, right? So keep it in that directional path of continuity. If there is a pressure in your knee in this kind of pose, you want to be on alert if there's some sensations that are, staying with you and not going away and they are not comfortable, then you might need to straighten your left leg a little bit. You might be very comfortable stretching it back behind you, but encourage a consistent grade of intensity to start to come into the pose. So if it gets real easy, you might feel, oh, I can stretch a little further with that left arm. I can really take my block a tiny bit overhead, farther and deeper sensation. Somehow you get back together in the center. Not too far away. Good. So feel where the back of the navel, what's going on in that space? Is it kind of still? Does it feel passive or stagnant? If that space is really stagnant, I want to encourage you to try to get that left arm or the side of the waist to stretch and help the core muscles to work on their length. A few more. After the last few more. Okay, so where we're going to flow here is we're going to rotate. Now I know as we turn, we're going to need to get our sand away. And the leg pads have been kind of buckled in the inner thighs lately. So when we rotate in with that left knee, I want you to take the bolster off to the side of your mat and then pull your blankies in, your cloth stack. Okay, sit on top of that stack and then take a bolster to the front, in front of your legs. Okay. You know, the nice thing in the home practice is you could kind of rummage around with that bolster any way you like. You can put it under your legs and just kind of check in with how the legs feel. You can keep it between. Doesn't have to be any particular exact way. But I want you to try to put your legs on top of the bolster like this. It's maybe not a common piece of work that we do, but we'll take the belt. If it's already buckled, keep it buckled. You're going to want that soon. So reach to the bottoms of the feet and give a sense of pulling so that the legs are still bending because you've got a bolster stuck under them. They can't completely straighten out, but you can feel the back muscles that you were just winding around react. Okay, I want you to work on sitting up, right? So instead of the rounded patterns, we're in more of a staff pose, right? We're upright. Right, so feel where the neck is, maybe tilt your ear to the shoulder, each side. Feel the circulation at the side of the neck. When the hands hold the belt pretty firm, it enables that neck to get a deeper stretch. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take the belt aside and we'll move. Let's see, we're going to do our right leg out and our left foot on the bolster. So the left foot is on and the knee turns out. So you're on a lot of height. So if it's a little too easy for you, like you want a little more stretch, you can just take a blanket away and it'll give that to you. But I'm going to encourage you to try this one. Now the leg is so high up, a block won't really probably be formative in learning this, but you'll probably like a couple blocks in front of you besides the bolster, and then also take a sandbag to the top of this left thigh. Okay, so I've got this hip that's wondering what's going to happen to it, connecting with the leg, And this knee is pretty high up. I'm intentionally having this much bulk under my seat. So tilt forward, flex the left foot. Make sure it's flexing, right? You want this foot to truly flex and on the board that it's on, the bolster. And then when you lean forward on the bolster spine-wise, you're going to extend. I know, your extension is in your spine here, right? So you're letting the back line of energy reach and let the energy motion down at this point. So you're leaning downwards, flexing the left foot. Yeah, we can't see if you're exactly flexing, but if you need to take a little break from that focus, you can soften the foot, but encouraging you to keep it with flex. Okay, now when you come back up, take one of your blocks to the left and behind you and hold to that left knee below or maybe on the knee itself. And feel when you have that connection to that left knee, you're gonna rotate to the waist. So I want you to feel when you hold the knee that you're actually rotating your core tundra here. So I like to kind of get a feel there on that core if it's actually capable of rotating. So when I work on my musculature in the center of the body, I tend to use my arms a lot to tug. So I want you to use that block behind you. Make sure it's low enough that you're actually kind of able to push into it, right? So you push a little bit into that block behind you and gives you a way to propel around. And push out into that right foot. So flex through the foot, turn through the waist. And if there's potential, you could land your eyelids to closing for a few moments. Yeah, whatever's in your soundscape, see if you can stay with the emphasis of the pose. The seated spinal twist, rotation. Push through the foot, the right foot. Okay, now we'll move the block with us back out to the left side, but I want you to take your left arm, reach it across the chest, hook the right elbow under, and then you'll take the arms into Garudasana, eagle arms pose. So I've got my left arm hugging over my right, intertwine the arms, and lift the elbows up. So spend the moment where you feel the lift of the arm bones out of the middle upper back. And you could bring your elbows down, but try to keep the spine tall. I encourage you to try to move them up if that's possible for you, but understanding it could be limiting for our back strength. So build that back core lift. Inhale. Exhale, arms up and spread them out. Bring your hands back. See if they can clasp for a moment without trying to push the palms together. I want you to clasp them so they're open. So you reach the interlace of the fingers and you motion them back. Now, if the shoulders are rolling in, which is typical here, I'm going to work on moving my shoulders back. I want to keep the reach of my hands together. If that doesn't work for you, don't do it. Get a belt. Grab the belt behind you and hold the belt to open it up. So I like that. Preferably, this is the old school, it's typically taught, use your hands. But it's a little much on a wrist sometimes. But the wrist could be challenged with the belt too. So we're all a little different. So keep that awareness in your upper back and then let go of any grip and switch out. We're going to take the left leg out. Now in between sides, just put the sandbag either center of the legs or off to the side, and then lift up the bolster. Find your legs on the blankets and tip forward. Lean, let your legs be as close to the mat as you find helpful. So you might need to bring them in a little bit as you emphasize that length of the back of the spine spatially, all the way through the low back. through the legs. Right? It should be the back of the legs down into the lower bones. And do you feel bones that are pushing, or do you feel reaction in muscles when you go forward? Even if you're pretty flexible, this could be a potent pose. Now the left leg is going to keep its reach, and we'll lower the bolster down and place the right foot up. Knee is obviously going to have to rotate out. So we have these different paths of movement in our back we're working through. So let's add our sand to the upper right thigh and place attention here with the blocks in front. We'll do a little bit of a decreased timing in this direction because we've had enough of these forward motions. So I want to collect that time carefully, kind of crafting for the reaction we're working with our hips. So when you lean forward and we let our spine go into extension. So one thing you might think of with extension when you sit down and you lean a little forward is if you can reach your ribs and your heart, like it feels like it's lifting as high as they can go. So there is a arch in the spine to get there. And when you're sitting with this type of intensity, it's hard to push your tail back. It's almost like the weight of the pelvis and the sitting bones is plenty of detail. So as we lean forward, we feel that arch and swoop in the spine. And you breathe on a regular basis here, assuming breath when you go to forward bends is a little easier than when you're in a chest opener, but I find some days it's the opposite for me. So I guess there's some days that it's easier to forward fold and other days not. Okay, now kindly take the block with you. One block is good. You're going to come upright and turn to your right and place that block behind you. Place it at a low enough height or no height. If you're very long limbed back there, you might not need the block. You might be on the floor with your hand. So I want you to be able to push into what your hand is on top of. Right, the floor is a prop. So when I push, I'm using that direction with my left hand below my knee, the right hand on the block, and I'm actually trying to tug with my left hand and push with my right hand, and maybe my stomach can relax, but my ribs can turn. Right, so you're getting that circulation between the vertebral column, opening up the spaces, right? Even though it might feel like it shortens them, you're creating circulation and hydration in your back. Less jamming. So breathing with this position of twisting. Give it a few more directional rotations. Push through the left heel. Try to keep that dynamic. Good. Now the tendency is on the exhale for the belly to basically draw in and the twist to happen, right? So it's inhale, usually that propels you forward, exhale, it turns you around. So use that dynamic in the core body. Give it the moment ahead here to unwind, turn forwards. Take the block back out to the side. And this time when we come back out with that right leg, so we got both legs in their wide position, you're going to bring your feet down so your knees point up, and then take the bolster up and lean forward. Door one is the feet are down, the knees are wide. It's kind of like happy baby pose, but seated, okay? And then you can bring your feet to scoot in on the mat itself and lean forward. The second phase would be to take the right foot forward of the left, cross-legged, so seated in cross-legged right foot forward of left, Sukhasana pose, and lean forward. So maybe you can get there, right? So you've got no bolster under your foot now. It seems like for some of us it might be easy. For some, you might be craving some more props under your legs or a sandbag, but stay with the energy of forward motion. Okay, and then come back through a pulse of sitting tall and switch the leg crossing. Left leg forward of right, lean forwards. And maintain that energy of crossing the legs, not crossing the ankles, right? So some of us get into a pretty tight bind with our seated cross-legged poses. So let it kind of spread the leg part so they can be distant from each other. So there's a wider base for your hip frame to possibly open up. These are like pretty knee friendly positions for the hips. They're not a real deep twist in the knee, right? We're not pushing the foot back to the hip bone. It's starting to make pigeon sound downright bad, huh? Okay. Just depends, doesn't it? Now, when you launch your bones forward here, not truly launching off of your blanket, but moving forward, you've got all these parts kind of in the way from you actually like coming to a Sphinx pose. You've got all these pieces here that you have to bypass. So I want you to kind of visualize what that aim of the arms is right now, the ribs, the arm pieces, the spine, okay? And as you shift back, you're gonna take the left leg back, put the bolster down, and then you're gonna actually come back to the knees. I want you to move the blanket away, and then you'll lower down on top of the bolster. And you know, we've done this with the blocks underneath. This blanket is not too big of a deal, but let's go with our blocks off to the side. So we have our hands under shoulders, or ish, what you kind of think is your shoulder line. And point your toes so that they feel like they're kind of pointing a little bit inwards. So you get a feeling of the top of the foot, a little bit of this inward toe motion. And then with the elbows by your sides, try to lift up your core bones. They're not quite as thick, right, as some of the other bones in the body. So they're kind of funny to lift up from this position. But when you're here, can you move your elbows down? Oh, that's easy. You can find the comfort and strengthen through the glutes, through the rear muscles. So I want you to feel your elbows down, feel your chest reach forward, feel the arch in the spine. Maybe close your eyes and really connect to that core backing all the way through the ribs and around into the upper chest. Slide the hands back, push, lift forward and up, feel the arch. Okay, now we'll hook the toes under. They may still feel connected with that pivoting in. So when you come back to table, you're going to stretch the right arm forward and reach the left leg back. Now the challenge here is that I have my knees apart to do this, and that's why it's a little more challenging. Now if you need to, you can start with the knees together, left leg back, right arm forward, but you choose. You might be tipping over a bit. So alternating arm and leg reach. Good for bone density, right? This is a good coordination shape. Okay, and then lower the right hand down. Now as the left knee comes down, I'm going to space the knees apart and then take the right leg up and the left arm forwards. Yeah, try to take your left leg forward. Please don't. Okay, so my right hand is a little cast off to the side. It's not perfectly under my shoulder, so I'm using it for a balancing point. But feel when you have that range of the leg and arm, the depth of control in your back, okay? Now, when the left hand comes down or onto your back to notice that intense musculature back there working, I want you to come down with the right knee and hands down and come into a good cat pose where you really tuck under. The chin pulls to the chest in Jalandhar Bandha, so you're working with that chin tuck in, and the back is trying to round, really trying to scoop. Now notice if your legs have anything to do with this rounded, stretched, flexed spine. Okay, if the legs do anything, they can actually participate. Now when you move the hips back and center, we're going to hook the toes under, and then as you walk your hands to your blanket, I would encourage you just to move your bolster a little forwards, and then lift up your knees and shuffle your feet forward. You know, kind of take your props around here. I want you to place your feet under hips-ish, and then you're going to get your belt. And I'm going to demonstrate this forward bend with a supported belt. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come up, use my hands on my thighs to help myself up. I know you'll see half of me, but the important part is you see the base. My blanket's a little away, so I'll shift it. But what I have is a wide loop, and I'm going to make my loop so wide that it goes up to my ribs. I think this actually works pretty good. We used this a little bit ago. I guess it works out. So you're going to step into your belt that's behind you, and you got to step into the belt with the belt to the back of you. So be really careful about how much you stretch your feet out in the belt. My feet are a little closer than hips distance. It makes it easier the closer your feet are in this one with the belt range. So I got my belt, it's about as high as my tailbone. Okay, and I'm going to scoot it so the buckle is on the side of my hip. Think of this as your challenging part of your class today. Okay, so you're going to bend your knees. You want to have the knees in a healthy bend, not squeezing in. And you're going to actually work. Now, everyone's range of motion is really different for hamstrings. So this means some of you might need your belt longer, but it's still going to frame your foot and the side of your pelvis. Now, this is to let the organs soften and relax and rest in this inversion. So if you are really averted to this one, you are a little worried about how far down your head goes, you can put your bolster on your blanket and be here, right? But I think questions will come. So let me see if I can find what that might be. So the blanket is, the bolster and blanket are down, but this belt, it really needs to be as low as it can be on your back, right? It needs to be, sacrum is a good place. So that flat triangular bone at the base of your spine, it's not on your sitting bones, okay? But when you're forward, the key is that your core muscles can soften, right? So it's relaxing the tummy time. So as your head maybe lowers down, maybe your hands come down. If you're pretty mobile, the challenge here is that you drop down and then the belt kind of starts to go over your back. So that's why you really need your belt back, right? So you might keep adjusting until you get this so your sitting bones are open. You can bend your knees, but I want you to try to lengthen the legs and really feel the leg circulation. Does anyone feel this pose in this group? It's a little bit bizarre, isn't it? There was a day a while back, we did a bones class, probably like 7 years ago. We did something like this with our back at the wall. We tried to get our back on the wall, stepping into the wall with our head at the wall, but this is about the same kind of thing. So give it a few moments. If you're averse to it, remember, you got your bolster, use it. I kind of like this bolster here. It feels kind of nice. I'm aware that you might get a lot of sensation even layered into your side of your leg here. So use the belt for maximum resistance. Try to, kind of push into it. Now the belt buckle is here, so if you need to tighten it, you can, or loosen it. Okay, give it a few more moments. This is not one we come in and out of over and over. It's one we get into and stay for a few moments. So we'll be here about 2 total minutes. So feel where the breath starts to get a little less laborious here, and your brain centers down. It feels like your sitting bones are pushing back away from you, right? You're tilting. Try to move your weight forward a little bit on the roots of your toes. Lots of sensation. Brain below the heart if possible. Okay, now, if we're coming out of this one, it's important that you just let the belt slide off of your back instead of unbuckling it. So I'm going to let your hands, bring them back to the belt, bend your knees just a tad. So the belt is now off. And then linger with stepping your feet out, maybe slide the belt away. Step your feet out plenty as far out as they want to go, even to the edge of your sticky mat is great. And then lower down. Now, if you do find your bolster and blankets are very close and you tend to lower down and touch them, that is very good inversion, right? If you can get the forehead to touch down. And it might be a far cry for you. So you could find, don't cry, but you might put some props under your bolster and it's a little bit more comfortable. As long as you don't create that seesaw effect. You don't want your bolster to toss up at you. Take a few more moments here. Now with the knees bending. Okay, we got here from being on the floor to get our feet in this position. We pushed ourselves back and up. So this time we're going to scoot our feet a little closer. And you have arranged with your bolster, you have an arrangement with it to move it forward and slide your blankets back. Even on your feet is good, right? Because then you can just step back off of the blanket pressure. So I step back, I'm going to try to walk myself back into this forward motion down to my hands and knees. It's not always the most easeful transition, but it works. And then when I'm here in this table pose, I want you just to notice when you stretch the back of the leg this time, you're going to step the right foot to the top corner of your mat and lengthen the front of the left thigh down onto the bolster. Okay, so you're going to knee on a blanket and a bolster under the left front of the leg. It might not touch the whole thigh. It might just be a piece of it that it meets. So you're trying to feel maybe your hands on blocks. If this is tough on your wrists, put a block under each elbow. Right, I could just adjust my blocks now wide and have that broadness in the back. And lengthen through the front of the core body, through your ribs. Shift your hands onto the floor or the blocks, and I want you to transition so the other side comes into the shape. So it's a gecko pose, and so we use the bolster under the thigh, and we feel possibly parts of the back of that left leg, but maybe a little more in the inner thigh and the top of the base thigh. So experiment with your consciousness and breath. Especially if the pose pathway is not exactly what you thought. Patience. Now, well, there's a reason for the pattern today. So when we come back with we're going to keep our left foot forward and out. We're going to move our hips back a bit. Now, if you were on your elbows a moment ago down here, you're going to use the hands to push you back. But you're going to pivot your bolster across the mat and walk the left foot in, toe heel to the right side of your mat. If this is a complete knee violation, you can sit on the bolster and then scoot your legs forward too. So this isn't for everybody. But when you come around to sitting, I want you to feel where your sitting bones are on your bolster. Then take the blanket from behind, toss it back a little bit. And then coming onto the back space, I've got my bolster under my pelvis. And then I'm going to swing the knees up and actually get into legs up right away. So, and some of this moves a little speedy, but we're trying to keep the cycle with the legs right now. So I get my sand, or you use a belt under your foot, under your feet, not just one foot. We could do single leg presses with our sandbag. Okay, so we've got our legs in this inversion. And so the last forward bend we did, that's classified as an inversion. But this in my mental bank is what the inversion line of energy is, right through the groins this way. But there's a long discussion on that anyhow. But right now we're reversing the flow of gravity to the heart and the lungs. So lifting through the legs. Yeah, feel what it's like when you muscle a little bit in the back of the legs and the feet flex. And the arms stretch open to cactus. Good. So feel where the shoulders explore. Maybe you shrug them a little bit. Maybe you guide them back and maybe a little bit downwards. Feel the breath as it comes in through the nose and manages its way out. And it may be the same breath that you're exhaling, it may not, as far as your oxygen cycle. So the importance is to just simple-mindedness with breathing. And the body sometimes takes care of itself. And it has some abilities to heal. Beyond our consciousness, right? What we muster up in our mind that is occurring. So let it heal, let the internal organs rest in this position. And the position of the diaphragm to be strengthened. And now if the feet are a tiny bit forward, it would be useful for your core. So I want to give us, rather than such a load of poses, find the most potent that we can right now as we come to our kind of final spinal here. So I want you to get a feel of that lift of the heels, that stretching of the bottom of the foot, flexing. And then find what would be kind of a softening of that direction in your legs. So it might feel a little bit like the foot goes from that total flex to neutral. And then do the leg muscles change, or does it stay about the same? Might be similar. Okay, so the key is the inversion now. So we'll stay with that. We'll bend the knees to feeling about a leg press. And then we'll move the sand just to the back of your legs. This is knee friendly for all. So this is a good one. We maybe have practiced with it on the shins, but we're knee friendly here. So we get a feel of the belly getting a little pressure now. So as we work into our hip finale here, I want you to let the lower back muscles kind of feel that flexion. It's no different than a forward bend. It's an upside down forward bend as far as your back muscles direction. Yeah, so for some of us that aren't as much of a fan as standing and going down to a forward bend, these versions might be a little bit more comforting for the internal, nervous system reaction. So when you move the sand, we're going to take the hands to the bolster, and I want you to push it so it's really away from under your back, and feel your back lengthen. Notice this is like when you come out of bridge pose, right? You guide your spine down. Now we can't really get the bolster back again, right? That's not really mechanically easy. But I want you to notice that scoop of the knees into the chest, because when we had the bolster under our back, it was a bridge pose, even though it was simple. So now when you have your feet on the bolster, I want you to take the feet a little wider. Make sure that the bolster is far enough forward that your knees are comfortable. So if my knees are pulled into my chest, it will be a little bit awkward when I swivel the knees. So push the bolster enough away that you can't reach it with your fingers. And feel your feet slightly turned out. They're probably parallel, but you mentally have a wiring that they're turned out. So that means they're probably parallel for most. And you're going to tip the knees side to side, windshield wiper the legs. So get a feel of this motion. Give it some time. We are going to do a nice little hip crossover in a moment. So if you've got stuff around your side yard, just kind of start to flow it away, so your knees are going to have nothing that's going to block them on the path of movement. And recognize when you swivel your knees both directions, the arch of the spine. So if you can tuck a hand underneath your back, be careful because you don't want to smash your wrist here, but make sure there's a little arch in the spine to create this passage. And then we're going to push the bolster all the way over to the right side. So it's straight up, it's spine-wise to the side of your mat. And you'll cross your left leg on top of the bolster. So swivel the hip over. Okay, opposite of windshield wiper, swivel it across. And if you happen to have anything to tuck in behind the sacrum, a ball or block or nothing at all is okay. And then add a sandbag to the outer left leg. Feel the texture of kind of accomplishing that circulation. The ball doesn't have to be always up the sacrum. You might go, oh, well, it feels kind of a little bit comfortable, a little lower, where it kind of grips on. And then pursue opening the left arm and turning your head to the left. Let your eyes close. Feel that concentration of the stomach turning. It's like the opposite hip direction of twisting, like we did earlier when we had our foot on the bolster in front of us. It's a nice pairing of poses, 20 minutes after that last one coming into this one for the hip. So simply let the leg rest into the bolster. If it doesn't rest, you need a blanket on top of the bolster. So add what you need. Good. Give it a few moments. Breathing. Now emphasizing the awareness in the left hip. If it feels pretty mild with the crossover as far as the intensity, that's okay. It doesn't need to be pressed into further. Feel that smooth line that's adapting from your back muscles into your hip. And then guide the props away from that left leg. And as you prepare to switch over, you might go very mindfully, kind of kindful in the hip. So this hip has had a bit of exposure, okay? So I would encourage you to bring that left knee up and towards the left side of the waist and roll into the back. Bring your knees to your chest, maybe grab your bolster, and then bring it over to the left side and keep the knees connected inwards to your chest-ish, right, directionally in. to smooth out the low back. Then the left leg goes down and the right leg crosses over to the bolster. So the skin at the back can adjust. And then if you have that ball and the sand onto the exterior right thigh, not required, right? If you're not interested in extra props for this crossover, you can work with simply the leg swinging over to the bolster and being right there. So a few moments here. Yeah, knowing that any of these could be something you could use in your practice, aside from a class session. Maybe you just do these with legs up the wall or something for a night practice. So right now we feel a crossover of the right leg to the bolster, and the hip fibers start to adapt. If you tend to have some gripping, like in pelvic floor, like it tightens, this would be a good one to reduce that hyper. For some of us, it's hypotonic, but the tone in the pelvis, see if you can let that go, relax that a little bit. And let the head roll to the right. So give yourself permission to surrender. And finally, let that right leg stay connected to the bolster. Bring the left hand to that exterior right leg, hip, or towards the thigh space. And then scan the body for what would be the most comforting approach for you to go into a final pose. You know, it might be just here where you are already reclining, so you don't jinx the nervous system too much. You might slide your sand and any other props. And you might decide, well, I want to be right here. I'm comfortable. I'm going to get my blocks. I'm going to slide them to the sides of my legs underneath and come into a Baddha Konasana here. Some people might like this, and especially if you're already on your back. Some might want to put their bolster so it's under the back of the knees. So this is very comfortable for your lower back after all the swinging of the knees. So finally, you can come into a spatial connection for the pelvis to feel like it's quite responsive, but your back is in a softening state. And if you decide to add that sandbag, you can place it across the rib connector and thread the arms so they have a spatial loosening out, like it's a yoga belt, right? The arms kind of are strands out from the shoulder, whether they're low or they're extended or wide. And lift up the internal organs with the breath and center back the organs so they really go back and down and towards the floor. The opposite of, in some ways, a daily human existence is oftentimes the organs are in this vulnerable and prolapse state, right? So instead of being forward and dropping them down, we're on our back and we're trying to elongate that core body in a very comfortable sweep of the lungs. So moving the inhale, filling the lungs, feeling the belly move, and relaxing on the out breath. Join in this position for a few moments. Remember, you can have your legs where it feels comfortable for you, even if they're up at the wall. Now with the feet aware, I want you to feel the feet maybe circling outwards or inwards. And then elongate your center, bring your hands together, interlace, stretch your arms so they reach back overhead. We all might be in a different attention with the props, but a similar intention. And then release the grip of the hands. And I want you to let your hands settle onto your upper core, sand or no sand, and slide your feet in towards your seat, knees pointing upwards, feet on bolster or on ground. And then use that as a positional power so that when I move the sand away, that gives me a little bit of an ability to kind of thrust the knees in. When I have a bolster under my feet, I can kind of propel my knees in a little easier, right? And then hold on to them, circle the knees just a tiny bit, side and around to massage the sacrum. And as that sacrum has a widening and centering effect from the movement, roll to the side and bring your hands down to serve your body to come up. And find a seat, whether it's got something under it, that would be helpful. Kind of a comforting path of the legs, and I'll have a little soft crossing of the ankles, and you can find them closer or farther and feel the awareness, the collective. Even if there is a tiny sense of distance, there is this connection of practice. So sharing that connection, lift the hands perhaps to the heart space, bowing into your heart center and surrendering there. Let's inhale, filling the body,